morning, Dr. Mwangi. It's truly a pleasure to be speaking to you bright and early from Johannesburg. Good morning, all our viewers. This morning, I have the privilege, in fact, I could argue and say it's one of those when you have a list in life of things to do. And one of those is to interview the one and only Dr. James Mwangi. And for those of us who know him well, and for those of you who know him out there, know that Dr. Mwangi is a champion of not just building companies, building individuals, but a very big champion of women across the world and not just the continent. In fact, for those of you watching from Nairobi, I'm afraid to say the world has claimed Dr. Mwangi to be theirs because of what he does. This morning, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Mwangi as our Fintech Diversity Radar Ambassador. The Fintech Diversity Radar is an initiative which has a vision that is built first globally as the first global scorecard along the lines of the Sustainable Development Goals focused on fintech. The whole idea of the Fintech Diversity Radar was really to map our gender diversity and to understand the impact of women and their contribution in the digital economy. Dr. Mwangi is not a stranger to the digital economy, but more important, he's not a stranger to the importance of ensuring that once you develop women, if you develop a girl, educate a girl, you change a society, you change a community, and you change a world. So from a digital landscape, the future is definitely from a digital point of view. And we know that future cannot be mapped out without ambassadors of the standing of Dr. Mwangi. Dr. Mwangi, thank you very much for being with us today. I want to have a conversation. I want to have a conversation with you. And I want to start by getting our viewers to learn more about the more important and the first woman in your life, your mother. As we understand, and for those of us who've read about you, know about you, understand that she herself was an entrepreneur. And in fact, I imagine if she was still around, would be an advocate and a member of the Fintech Diversity Radar. But more important, I believe she was the one that influenced the development, not just of you as a young, astute, and I call you young, you're still young, astute change agent, but also as the entrepreneur that you are today. So let's talk about Mom.
Thank you very much. My mom, Grace, was widowed when I was young, at the tender age of 36, and left with 7 kids to look after. I am a creation of my mother's inspiration. She nurtured me, nursed me to be who I am today. And I'll forever be grateful on each side. When you reflect, you can appreciate when you have your own kids, the role that mothers play. But the values that my mom taught me have brought me this far, have protected me to be who I am, and have shaped me to have the influence that I have. Beyond the values that she inculcated in me, among them humility, among them hard work, and acknowledging that nothing comes without effort. She also brought spirituality in me and was my prayer warrior throughout her life. And so growing up also among my sibling sisters, she also taught me about the aspect of sharing and respecting the diversity of gender within the family. So Fordre brought among daughters, and at the same time sharing fairly and equitably whatever was available, taught me the goal of shared prosperity.
Right. Just touching on Ma'am again, one of the quotes you're famously known about, you always say to youngsters and in your wings to fly, to dare to dream, but to do that with humility. You've spoken about the values and the religious side, the spiritual side. Tell us more about that, the dare to dream and humility, because leadership, and particularly leadership today, in today's challenging era, I believe those lessons remain true, not just for young people, but for everyone listening today.
I think it is important for all of us to encourage young people that what truly distinguishes people is access to opportunities. And opportunities come to those who dare dream. So when they dream big, big opportunities comes into their lives. And it's opportunities that create who we are, because opportunities bring onto our path the tools that we need. They bring the people who we anchor on, the people who mentor and coach us, and all that. So for young people out there, daring to dream should be an inspiration to all of them. And dreaming big means then their path can be long and impactful over time. And so the only way to change the world is to imagine a world that is better than the world that we are in. That can only be a big dream. And being the catalyst of realizing that world is better. But it's also true that reality exists in two forms, in the mind and in the physical world. And it all starts with the mind. That which the mind can conceive, the body can deliver. So we conceive by dreaming, and then using our hearts and intellect and our physical energy, then we create the dreams in the world of reality, the world that we live in. So I don't think it only applies to young people, it applies to all of us. I think you dared to dream to become the leader you have become. And I think we dared to dream to democratize financial services so that we could have financial inclusion in Africa.
And that actually leads me to the next question. So how has your background compelled you to solve the African paradox of a continent endowed with resources, human capital, and yet weighed down by abject poverty?
I'm lucky, and I could categorize myself as an African child who has had the privilege and benefit of living in the two worlds. A humble world that I was brought up, and the world I'm living today of means and influence in society. And it has taught me a couple of things. That my needs, when I lived in the humble world, I was brought up in the village, remains basic as they are today when I live as a CEO of Equity Group. I can only have one plate of food at a time. I can only drive one car at a time. And essentially, we are all equal in terms of basic needs, irrespective of which world you live in. And it's for that reason that then I felt I could lend a hand in dealing with the paradox that we have in Africa of the two worlds, and try to create a better world, a more equitable world, a more resilient world where everybody have access and fulfillment in basic needs. I think Africa offers all of us enough if we could share equitably. And I felt we could share equitably in Africa if we shared opportunities equitably. And it's for that I'm lucky to have led Equity, as the name connotes, bring equity to society. And we felt we could bring equity in society by availing opportunities. And the basic opportunity we felt was particularly to farmers. 70–80% of the population in Africa are living out of agriculture. And we felt we could disrupt and modernize agriculture and transform it from peasantry to agribusiness so that it can be market-driven agriculture that provides beyond food and food security and nutrition for the family, but provide a marketplace for the excess that they produce, and where returns and value in agriculture would be enhanced. The second, of course, we then thought is how do we deal with the next generation? And we felt we could avail opportunities to the next generation to grow as an inspired generation. And we felt that if we give talented kids opportunities to access education, then they could not only transform themselves, but then they could transform their families, extended families, and communities, one by inspiring them, and eventually also by investing in themselves and their families. And that is how we started the Equity Wings to Fly and the Equity Leadership Program that today has seen 36,000 young kids get secondary scholarships, 17,000 kids get university scholarships, and 700 kids get global scholarships to leading universities. And the process that we have seen with 50,000 kids out there, we have created a critical mass in one generation that can produce ethical leaders, selfless leaders who really want to give back. And giving back is providing inspirational leadership and transformational leadership to society. Of course, that was not sufficient. We felt as the young generation come out of school, the best thing is to introduce them to the fourth industrial revolution. And we felt if we availed them opportunities for innovation by exposing the APIs of the entire group so that they can plug and play into the marketplace with their innovations, and they can serve ecosystems with the capabilities, then maybe would be making a great leap in inculcating a culture of innovation on the continent. But of course, the biggest one is entrepreneurship, because as you likely said, Africa is endowed with resources, human resources, natural resources, may it be water, may it be mineral resources. But besides that endowment is a population living in abject poverty. And that paradox can only be resolved by entrepreneurs who then pick the resources, mobilize the other factors of production, and convert those into goods and services, and hence create value and create wealth in the African continent. As they create wealth on the African continent, then they create millions of opportunities for jobs, while also creating the marketplace for African produce and services. So, and we feel it will only take no more than a generation if we truly focused the issue of poverty in Africa using entrepreneurship at scale and develop high impact entrepreneurship on the African continent. Of course, we can't leave health behind. Education is not sufficient unless the population is healthy. The quality of human labor is not defined by just intellectual capability, but the health of the body. And so we have launched out the Equity Afia franchise that brings doctors together to set up a parallel health system that complements government health programs, without then leaving behind the poorest or the most needy in our society. And partnering with development partner government agencies, then we are supporting 3.3 million households with social safety nets in terms of payments for the needed to keep them comfortable and reduce the pains of abject poverty. So those are some of the aspects that we felt would make to the contribution to the African continent, using what some people are now calling corporate philanthropy, using the infrastructure capability of the bank, which is doing very well, is being regarded as an African success to society, to do good to society, to give back to society, and to create an integrated world where the households and the business enterprises have a mutually beneficial relationship. And lastly is thinking about environment. knowing that as we all do this, we need to conserve, preserve, and maintain a sustainable environmental footprints.
Yeah. Dr. Mwangi, listening to you, I'm sure like most people, I got quite excited because we started off by referring to why the Fintech Diversity Radar exists and the pursuit of delivering the Sustainable Development Goals. But listening to you, I feel that everyone should hear your story because you are living and embodying the Sustainable Development Goals through the vision of Equity Bank. You've spoken to not just fintech opportunities, you've spoken to meditech and agritech. If I think in the back of my mind, the 50,000 young beneficiaries of Wings to Fly, I imagine that some of them will end up on our database because you have sent most of them to universities across the world, that collaborative approach that is happening around development. And if I listen to you as well, the equity story almost feels like it's a journey that in a way that most of us are striving to get to. So you may look at it as an accomplishment, you may look at it as something that you naturally embarked on, but I'm here to say to you, as I listen to you, I feel like it's a template that a lot of us should be taking forward as we build sustainable societies and communities. And from an African continent point of view, what you're speaking to now around philanthropy, what you're speaking to around agriculture, the future of technology is going to be key to driving that. But the equity story for me is fascinating because I started off looking at the Sustainable Development Goals. I started off expressing my excitement for having this conversation with you. But when I did a little bit more research, Equity Bank has grown tenfold every 5 years for the past 20 years. I'm going to repeat that. Equity Bank has grown tenfold every 5 years for the past 20 years. Clearly profitable while at the same time creating an enormous benefit to society. What is the secret to success and what is your mantra? I'm not the only one curious.
Thank you very much. I think this the secret of Equity's success lies in three things. The first one is the business model. It's a business model that aspires to leave nobody behind. It's an inclusive business model. The second aspect is a model that is very sensitive to gender balance and gender parity within. And I'm really glad that we consciously sought the sweet spot, which is a natural equilibrium point, that we have 50-50 contribution in terms of gender parity. Over time, that has somehow tipped, and today we have 54% of our customers being women. And that has brought the strength of diversity in the business, not just in the business model, but in the customer base of Equity. And the national equilibrium position then gives you the resilience that you really require because of the national balance that is embedded in it. And then we have adopted the tools of the fourth industrial revolution, particularly digitization and fintech capability earlier on. And fortunately, the convenience that it delivers to the customer base, the ability to scale the operations without necessarily moving to brick and mortar, but being more online because of digitized capabilities has helped us to become who we have become. We have been able to democratize financial access in Africa. We now have almost 15 million customers in a country like Kenya with an adult population of 24 million. So it tells you what percentage in a country with 7% financial inclusion, we have 60% of all the bank accounts in the country. And this, I would say, is a reward of using that capabilities. But having said that, it was not just the customer, we organized ourselves as a bank to give equal opportunities. And if you look, half of our board at the group level are women. If you look at the majority of the executive who report to me, whether it's my principal executive director, Mary, whether it's director of HR, whether it's the director of Fintech, whether it's the director of credit, whether it's the director now creating our future form, the Fintech form, Elizabeth. So that ability to create that positive tension between women and men in the workplace and challenge each other might have contributed because, as I say, that is the national equilibrium. The world has 50%. But I think it's the focus on women as customers that has might have given the biggest contribution. 58% of women in Africa are involved in self-employment. And as a result, as they seek to be supported by a financial institution, we seem to have become their national choice. And in the process, then, as they scale up their operations, as we go through the gender reforms, the social, the cultural, and legal reforms to enable women, then as an aggregator of their efforts, then benefit us disproportionately. And I can explain why we have been able to move from a $300,000 balance sheet to a $10 billion balance sheet within 25 years, or to move from 12,000 customers to 15 million customers. So I can see a correlation from all these, and I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to be part of the leadership during this transition.
Dr. Mwangi, I'm smiling because you make it impossible for anyone to interview. My next question was going to ask you to comment around the role of women globally. I mean, just recently, we've got Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, who's the World Trade Organization Director General for Africa. And I know I'm also a personal friend of yours. So you've taken the wind out of my wings and began to have a dialogue around women. So let's carry on that. Women clearly are the front, the middle, and the center of everything that you do. So it's even pointless to ask what you think about women in leadership. So let's have a conversation about what you're seeing around the role that women are taking, starting with your friend who's recently, that we're all very proud of as African women. She has carried our flag. So what are some of your advice, comments, as you clearly are a champion and a pioneer, and it's not a surprise you're an ambassador for Fintech Diversity Radar?
I think the recent appointment of the World Trade Organization Director General being a woman, and more importantly, an African woman, speaks a lot. And we couldn't have had a better news during this COVID pandemic, depressing times, than to receive the news of such an appointment. I think it also speaks a lot about women, and I would also like to cite a couple of global leaders, countries that have been lucky during this time to have been led by women. They seem to have performed better compared to the nations that have been led by men in protecting their populations, and particularly in handling the challenges of COVID-19 pandemic. Those two aspects speaks on the capability and competence of women. If there was anybody who could have doubted the capability of women, then that should no longer be a debate. I think it then speaks of the need for the world to build back better after COVID, better with equal opportunities for both men and women. Which the issue of discrimination of women, I think it should be left behind us. Maybe the lack of resilience and the inequality we have witnessed may have been because of the world missing the sweet spot of national equilibrium, where it gives equal opportunities to men and women. And I think the door should be open wider to give greater opportunities to women because they have demonstrated. But I think my call would be more to women, to see this as demonstration that the world is changing. And so women need also to embrace that change and dare to dream bigger, dare to raise their hand when called upon, when opportunities arise, not to be shy, and to be bold and courageous and step forward. So whether there will be need for greater coaching and mentoring for women leaders so that they are more audacious, they are more courageous to step forward when opportunities beckon. That is a debate I would be willing more to participate in and champion in. But also, there is a great demonstration that women have equal capability and competence than men. And so again, that is something that we shouldn't be holding at the back of mind, casting doubts on our daughters and the rest. We should bring them up knowing that the world, that they have the same capabilities and competences and that. And that then leads us to really focusing on removing structural and institutional barriers that exist in the society. May they be cultural barriers, may they be social barriers, may they be regulatory or legal barriers that we have lived with. Time has come for us to level the playing field between men and women, both at home and the workplace, both socially and economically, both culturally and in modernness. So that aspect should be dealt with, and we should seize the moment of building the world better, more equitably, to have gender equality and gender parity. And if I may challenge the industry of fintech, because we are talking at a time that we are really looking at the fintech gender ladder. I think we should open the door of involvement and engagement in fintech activities for more women. And I think, as you have always said, that which gets measured gets done. So let's use the ladder to spot out how many women are involved, because we are on the brink of transforming the world to the fourth industrial revolution. And digital divide would force women to be left behind. We must have digital parity as we enter into this industrial revolution. We must embrace fintech capabilities as women so that essentially we become drivers, not passengers. We become active participants in the fourth revolution and not being influenced. We should be the influencers and the drivers of the fourth revolution, so that we can be able to inspire the women, we can be able to inspire our daughters so that they can gain the courage and the confidence, because that's where it starts, to step forward and actively participate. The fourth revolution, because of network effect, will most likely aggregate and consolidate power, influence, and wealth in the hearts of a few. We should ensure those hearts of few are equally distributed between men and women.
Goodness me, I don't know, we could have you the whole day. I could listen to you. And you're so right. I always say that that which gets measured gets done. And Fintech Diversity Radar is really trying to strive to do that. So by collecting information and making sure we understand who are all the players out there. But you talk to the importance of young women, and you talk to what needs to be done. And I can't help but come back to your mother in terms of the influence that she's had. And I also know, listening to you, are not just young girls, but young boys out there. What advice would you give them? Usually I've asked you the question, what advice would you give to the young girls? But you say it, you embody it, everything you've done and acted, everything you do every day everything about Equity Bank has been, as you mentioned, even your own management team has put women at the center of it all. What advice would you give young men out there as we continue to measure and push forward the impact of young women as change agents?
I think let me speak to them as my children, both boys and girls, young men and young women. And looking back and on hindsight, I've realized that irrespective of how successful I may be regarded today, I may never be able to buy back my history. And I want to tell the young people that every step they make today counts as to who they will be into the future. And it's like walking on white snow. Those steps will show for the rest of their lives. And regardless of how wealthy they become into the future, they will not be able to erase those steps. So I would really advise them to mind the steps, to be conscious of the steps, that those steps will still give them pride at old age. They should not really be tormented because of how ugly the steps were. They can avoid the ugly steps, and they can avoid them by embracing a life of values. Essentially, values insulators, values create the guardrails that really protect us from tipping over. The good values tells us the limits of what we can do and what we can't do. They benchmark and create the flag points in our lives to ensure that we constantly ask ourselves whether we are truly on the right path to our destination. So the life you wish to live is what you are living today. You are not rehearsing. It's the real life that will be your history. Ensure that you are building a history that at old age, you'll be proud of what you did. If values are difficult to really abide to, look for a mentor and a coach. And nobody can love you better than your parents. Ask your parents to guide you. Seek their counsel, seek their wisdom. There was a day they were young, and so they have seen it all. And so nobody can love you better than your parents. So they will advise you on what to do. Beyond values is what we earlier on said. I challenge them to dare to dream big because the world requires dreamers, the world requires transformers, and it's only when you dream and start realizing your dream, the world keep on throwing opportunities to you. Opportunities are never given. Opportunities are grabbed. So it's only when you dream big that then you're able to pick the big opportunities that exist. And lastly is to dream about a life of impact, a life of significance. That will not come as magic. And it's unlike power and electricity that you switch on and off. But that is a journey. The journey starts today. You have had this call, you have had this appeal to you. Let's the journey, let's embrace values, let's embrace dreaming, let's embrace counseling and mentoring so that truly we can be men and women of significance and transformers for this world require transformative leaders. The greatest gift as young people you can give your generation is becoming transformative leaders. For what is truly lacking is very transformative leaders. And if we had a greater bias towards having more of women, the world will be better because women are endowed with nurturing and nursing capabilities as a natural instinct.
Dr. Mwangi, you just said it starts today, the day is today. Anyone listening would be inspired to walk away and seize the moment and seize the day. I'm sitting here very proud as a board member of Fintech Diversity Radar because having you as our ambassador means that most of the work is done, particularly because it's been your life's journey. So first of all, we'd like to thank you as our ambassador, but also for the support you've given. Part of the challenge of driving such a process is not just getting the right people, but also making sure that the vision is sold, the support is provided. And we talk about entrepreneurs and we talk about women. One of the challenges, and we see it in Fintech Diversity Radar, is moving beyond the talk and making sure that people put their money where their mouth is. What advice would you give to other philanthropists, given that you have put your money where your mouth is in supporting Fintech Diversity Radar? How would you challenge the others listening, not just the young ones, but the other philanthropists listening to this vision that you're driving?
I think two aspects. The first one is the need to embrace and to be part of building the world better. I think all of us should embrace a purpose driven world, a purpose driven economy. And we should build our companies based on purpose. And center at that purpose is people centricity. And in people centricity, I think equality at the gender level, equality in terms of fairness of distribution opportunities should be central. The private sector and entrepreneurs have a very privileged opportunity to be able to make quick decisions and to execute quickly. The second call to entrepreneurs is to be really champions of a more equitable world, a world where prosperity is shared. And this can really be executed by the private sector by regarding host communities as stakeholders and ensuring that as we pay for the regulatory license, we are also paying for the operational license. We get communities walking into our businesses and being our customers. We tap into the resources that communities have developed and that the communities own. We should ensure that they become stakeholders as shareholders in our businesses. And whether it is using a philanthropic approaches of corporate foundations to invest back in community, give back to community in a sustainable way, and not by social corporate giving. It's really embedding our stakeholder interest of community. I think that would be really central. And lastly is really to ask the business community to embrace the journey of molding capitalism better. I think the current formation of capitalism speaks of greed. It speaks of maybe rough edges. We should give capitalism a human face. We should give capitalism a soul. Capitalism should have empathy. And if capitalism had empathy, then we couldn't have the inequality that we see today. We couldn't have the abject poverty that we see today. There is enough for all of us. All that is not well done is distribution. And capitalism can be the best mechanism of redistributing opportunities. I don't mean redistributing wealth. I mean redistributing opportunities. Wealth is created by access to opportunities. If we give all opportunities, then the world will become naturally equitable. And there is no better mechanism of doing that than capitalism. And in doing that, then capitalism will acquire a human face. It will have empathy as its core value, and it will have a soul that drives the empathy.
Yep. And the soul that drives empathy is everything you've spoken about, and it's everything that you embody in more than one ways. As not just as a board member of Fintech Diversity Radar, I've had the pleasure and privilege of listening to you speak many a time. I've had the pleasure of working with you. And one of the things that if you research, you'll find it, but you won't necessarily, which is your other love for conservationism. Earlier on before we started, so I'm going to out you as a closing point and question. to just get you to talk to us about your love for conservationism, but more important, tell us about that rhino behind you as we close.
Thank you very much, Audrey. That's the image of Sudan, the last known black rhino in the world. And it constantly reminds me of what I saw with my eyes that my grandchildren will never see. It affirms to me that the stories we hear of animals that existed before us, dinosaurs, are true. And it challenges me maybe to play my role and make my contribution to conserve the environment that we live in, the fauna and flora that makes the world sustainable and beautiful to our eyes needs a helping hand. I think what we have seen in just one generation. I grew up in the rural setup, and there were many streams around the village. And as a young boy, I played with the butterflies all around. It's sad that my children didn't run around in the homestead to catch butterflies. They are no longer. We poisoned them with the chemicals that we use in our farms, and they are no more. We cleared the forest that surrounded the village, and the streams have dried. My children never played with the mud that I played, and I don't know whether my grandchildren would not go to a village that will have started becoming a desert, because everything that I saw, my children have not seen because of the pace of change. And I want to appeal to each of us to reflect, particularly those of us are more than 50 years, how we grew up and the environment we grew up and the environment we are bringing out, and just really mirror the change that has just happened in one generation, and just figure out how the world will look 10 generations from now. We can avert that change by champions of environmental conservation, ensuring that we create a sustainable world by serving environment, what responsible use of natural resources, if I may use that phrase, so that we bequeath future generation the world that was given to us. It will be a sense of responsibility to do that. It's not that much is being asked out of us. We're just being asked to be responsible. And I think it's a virtue each of us should embrace, to be responsible, to leave the world better than we found it. If we truly love our children, the best we can demonstrate is loving the environment.
Dr. Mwangi, I can't help but remember something I heard you say once, I think it was one of your interviews: to whom much is given, much is expected. I feel privileged to be speaking to somebody who is a living embodiment of that change and expectation to do much more than what they already are. I will be watching you as a board member of Fintech Diversity Radar. I'll be excitedly listening as you, as our ambassador, take forward the cause to the next level of understanding and putting together a database beyond that, understanding what women are doing in the fintech space and recording that so that we can understand where the gaps are and where the support is. As we close, what would the final message be from you, but in a fun way as well? What would your sisters say about you?
I'll leave my sisters to judge. They're siblings or brothers. I don't want to try and influence them. But I could say I'm very, very proud of them. I took care of them. They have softened me. They have made me have a greater sense of emotional intelligence. And I'm grateful for the love that they have spoiled me with. And yes, I wish them well, and I also appeal to them to make their contribution to get the women's voice heard more loudly than ever before. And lastly, to say what a privilege it was to have this chat with you. And to the Fintech Radar, I'm grateful to be your ambassador, and I'll do what I can to champion a national cause for me. It will be a great honor to my mother, and she'll be happy to see me pushing gender equality. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And it is a global cause, so you continue to wear the global flag. I started off by apologizing to the Kenyans for the fact that you're now a voice that is revered, respected, admired across the world. And we look forward to seeing even more. I do have this feeling that you've only just begun. Thank you, Dr. Mwangi.
All right, and good day.
Thank you. You too. Have a fantastic day.
Thank you.